Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a wildly compressed, chaotic timeline from July and August of 1945. We're talking about a moment where decades of highly secretive scientific research slammed headfirst into high-stakes global politics. And the decisions made in those few weeks, they permanently altered human history. So let's walk through exactly how that ticking clock counted down.
We've got to start our chronological countdown in the New Mexico desert on July 16th. It was here, at a remote site called Trinity, that the Manhattan Project's intense race to beat the Nazis culminated in something truly awe-inspiring: a man-made sun. The device, which was just nicknamed the Gadget, was a plutonium implosion device that detonated with a massive yield of about 21 kilotons. A coded cable was immediately fired off, reporting that the test was successful beyond all expectations. Section 1. The Geopolitical Chessboard, Potsdam and the Ultimatum. Let's zoom out to the global stage and see how this breakthrough shifted the balance of power overnight. So, picture this. President Truman cryptically mentions a brand new weapon of unusual destructive power to Joseph Stalin at the Potsdam Conference. Stalin's reaction? He just smirks and says, "I hope you'll make good use of it against the Japanese." Why the smirk? Well, thanks to a deep network of espionage, Stalin already knew all about America's atomic secrets. The global posturing had officially kicked off. That new weapon heavily backed the ultimatum delivered just 2 days later. The US, Britain, and China issued the Potsdam Declaration. It called for Japan's unconditional surrender, disarmament, and war crimes trials. And the alternative? Bluntly, prompt and utter destruction. But over in Tokyo, Japan's heavily divided leadership met the declaration with total silence. They were holding out, betting on a last-ditch hope that the Soviet Union might actually mediate a peace deal rather than facing down the Allies' threat. Moving to Section 2, August 6th, the bombing of Hiroshima. With the diplomatic windows slammed shut, the machinery of unprecedented destruction was set in motion. The target selection process here was incredibly cold and calculated. Secretary of War Henry Stimson specifically argued to take Kyoto off the top of the list. Why? Because it was the cultural and academic heart of Japan, and he knew destroying it would ruin any chance for post-war reconciliation. Tokyo was skipped because months of brutal firebombing had already devastated it, so you couldn't accurately measure the new bomb's damage. That left Hiroshima, an untouched city, making it the absolutely ideal site to gauge the devastating blast effects. The timeline for the morning of August 6th shows this relentless, unstoppable momentum. The B-29 Enola Gay takes off at 2:45 a.m. carrying the little boy bomb. But look at 7:09 a.m. Japanese radar actually detected the incoming aircraft. However, because it was only a small group of 3 planes, the military made a tragic miscalculation. They assumed it was just a weather or reconnaissance run, so they canceled the air raid alert. Daily life resumed, just minutes before the target bridge came into the bombardier's sights. At exactly 8:15 a.m., the bomb drops. Missing the bridge by about 240 meters, it reaches its predetermined detonation altitude of 600 meters directly over the Shima Surgical Clinic. Internal mechanisms fire a uranium projectile into a uranium target, and in less than a microsecond, it initiates an unstoppable nuclear chain reaction. It unleashes the explosive force of roughly 15,000 tons of TNT all at once. Ground zero was literally unimaginable. Survivor accounts describe a completely silent, blinding flash, momentarily brighter than the sun itself, followed instantly by a wave of crushing pressure. A nuclear fireball 200 meters across formed in the sky, vaporizing everything it touched. Survivors who lived through that initial blast recall horrifying scenes of people suffering severe, immediate burns and a deadly firestorm erupting around them. The intense thermal radiation was so extreme, it permanently etched eerie, human-shaped shadows into the pavement where people had been standing just seconds before. To put the human cost into perspective, out of Hiroshima's 350,000 residents, an estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people died instantly from the sheer force of the blast, the intense heat, and immediate radiation. But the nightmare didn't end there. By the close of 1945, the cascading, long-term effects, the raging firestorms, and agonizing radiation sickness pushed the total casualties well past this unfathomable number, 140,000 lives. Later that very day, President Truman addresses the public, and it's a stark contrast to the quiet backroom diplomacy of Potsdam. He leans heavily into this ominous threat, warning of a rain of ruin from the air. He's making it crystal clear to the world that this unfathomable destruction was literally just the beginning if Japan didn't surrender.
So how did Japan's leaders respond to a whole city being wiped off the map? You'd probably think this would end the war instantly, right? Actually, no. Paralyzed by disbelief and deep internal division, Japan's leadership still did not offer a surrender. Let's turn to Section 3, Complications, Nagasaki and the Soviets. Moving forward to August 9th, we'll see how a chaotic second bombing mission unfolds alongside a massive geopolitical earthquake. It's been just 3 days, but the technological escalation is staggering. The second mission is assigned to the aircraft Boxcar, and it's carrying Fat Man. Unlike the uranium-based Little Boy, Fat Man was a plutonium implosion device. It was vastly more sophisticated and packed a much bigger punch, yielding roughly 21 kilotons. Now, the Enola Gate flight was relatively smooth, but Major Charles Sweeney's mission on Boxcar, it was a highly stressful cascade of errors. Right after takeoff, a fuel pump fails, instantly trapping 640 gallons of fuel. Then their accompanying photography plane completely misses the rendezvous point because it's flying at the wrong altitude. And finally, when they actually reach their primary target, the city of Kokura, the bombardier can't see a thing. It's wild how the whims of weather and intentional human actions literally alter history. The sky over Kokura wasn't just cloudy. Workers at a nearby steel mill were deliberately burning coal tar to create a massive smokescreen to hide the city from bombers. Facing anti-aircraft fire and running dangerously low on fuel after 3 failed passes, Boxcar abandons co-corresponding the phrase Kokura's luck and pivots southwest toward their backup target, Nagasaki. Over Nagasaki, it's more of the same, terrible visibility. They are literally moments away from having to ditch this highly dangerous weapon into the ocean just so they have enough fuel to fly home. But right before 11 a.m., the clouds part just enough for a brief visual confirmation. At 11:02 a.m., Fat Man is released, detonating 503 meters above the city. This explosion creates a mammoth nuclear fireball 222 meters in radius, instantly engulfing the city center. Inside that terrifying radius, the temperature briefly spikes hotter than the surface of our sun. Everything, buildings, vehicles, and human beings within that 222-meter bubble is simply erased from existence in a blinding flash. The initial blast wave pushes outward, completely crushing reinforced concrete structures for hundreds of yards. Uncontrollable fires spark everywhere. Survivors described a completely blackened sky, which was soon followed by a horrific, radioactive black rain that fell on the trapped victims and the smoldering landscape. By the end of 1945, between 60,000 and 80,000 people in Nagasaki had perished from the blast, the fires, and the immediate, brutal effects of the radiation. Finally, Section 4, the final dominoes, the squeeze and surrender. Let's pull back and look at the sheer overwhelming reality of the dual catastrophes that finally broke Japan's deadlock. This timeline perfectly visualizes the relentless geopolitical and military squeeze on Japan, all happening over just 9 days. Right in between the 2 atomic bombings, on August 8th, the Soviet Union launches a massive invasion of Japanese-held Manchuria. Remember how Japan was banking on Soviet mediation to end the war? Well, that hope was totally shattered right at the exact same moment their major cities were being atomically obliterated. So the geopolitical maneuvering and the stark scientific realities absolutely collided. Facing this two-front nightmare, the massive Soviet offensive closing in, and what he specifically referred to as the new and most cruel bomb, Emperor Hirohito steps in. He addresses his people, acknowledges that continued resistance is totally futile, and concedes defeat. Japan announces its unconditional surrender on August 15th, and on September 2nd, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the formal paperwork is finally signed. The most destructive global conflict in human history was officially over, just a matter of weeks after the Trinity test first proved the terrible, world-changing reality of the atomic age. We are now 8 decades out from the moment humanity first unleashed atomic destruction upon itself. As we continue to live under the shadow of what some call man's last bomb, all of these historical details leave us staring down a profound, urgent question. Will Hiroshima and Nagasaki forever mark the first, the last, and the only times these devastating weapons are ever used? Thanks for walking through this timeline with me today. Keep asking questions and keep